something is going on with our boys. And because of this, they wrote this report called The Lost Boys. And in this report, they say boys are struggling in education. They're more likely to take their own lives, finding it more difficult to find stable work, and far too often they're caught in crime. The numbers don't lie. Something has shifted, and we cannot ignore it any longer. It's not just about Andrew Tate or online influencers. These are symptoms, not the cause. The deeper truth is that too many boys are growing up without the guidance, discipline, and purpose they need to survive.
I'm a behavioral scientist turned dating coach. So that means that I take all the lessons from the field of behavioral science, how we make decisions, and then I apply them to the field of relationship science, which is how love works. And so I'm really passionate about this topic because for a long time, I've found that wherever I go, people say, I know all these great single women. Do you know any great single guys? And I just thought, oh, okay, maybe that's always been happening. But when I actually dug into the data, I saw that we are truly in a dating crisis right now. And there is a huge mating gap between the type of men that women are looking for and the type of men that are available. So we're nearing the lowest rate of marriage that we've ever had in American history. So fewer people are getting married. I was nervous about coming on here because I thought people would say, she's a male apologist. She doesn't see how much women are still struggling. I think everyone is struggling. I think life is hard. Yeah. But what's happening right now is we need to have empathy for young men and we need to bring them up because this isn't just a problem about young men. And patriarchy doesn't just hurt women. A lot of people think about the patriarchy as something that prizes men and hurts women. But when there's a very narrow definition of men, everyone is hurt by that. And that's all the research that I've done is over and over seeing women feel like they are not enough good men to date and men feel like they're being held to a ridiculous standard.
What sort of reference points do you draw upon? Because you've got some sort of unique access to data, right?
Right. So I work at Hinge for the last 5 years. And so I have access to tons of data there around how daters are dating now, how daters are dating differently, what sets successful daters apart. And then I also have conducted my own research for this conversation. I sent out a survey to thousands of my newsletter subscribers.
So I make my living looking at data and trying to come up with insights. Spend most of my career looking at data to try and add shareholder value. And then I have the luxury now of focusing on things I'm really interested in. The cohort that has ascended fastest globally is women. And this is a wonderful thing and huge collective victory. And the group that has fallen furthest fastest is men in Western markets. And the data was just so overwhelming. And also, I was close to being one of these men. I didn't have a lot of economic or romantic prospects when I was a young man, but there were programs and an environment where I could be successful. And I worry that some of the temptations of technology, the economic trends, had they been where they are now then, I could have very easily ended up a statistic.
Why would you date a woman if you're a guy? The value proposition is immediately obvious. Like men like women, they're fun to be around. They offer something that is like markedly different than what you find in other men. Men don't typically think about that. Like, why would I want to date a woman? What do you mean? It's a woman. Obviously, I want to date a woman. The value proposition is not there by default for whatever reason for women. And I don't think men ever spend any time thinking about like, what does a woman get out of dating me? They also kind of assume that it should just be the same on their end. Like, well, hey, don't you want to date a guy? Like, why would you not want to be with a guy? No. An issue that you run into is that women seem to be a little bit more comfortable being alone and single than men are. So, and then because the left is fucking retarded when it comes to talking about dating or anything, all of this territory is completely ceded to red pillars that will never give you good dating advice on anything.
This is a critical conversation around truly the future of humanity because marriage rates are down. That means birth rates are down. And so this conversation is extremely important.
If you're in the lower quintile of income earning men, only 1 in 4 chance of getting married.
And this has huge impact on our society because we know that married people are healthier, they're wealthier, they live longer. When couples are married, they actually have lower rates of child poverty. And so this has huge implications for our society if we're having fewer marriages, especially when you think about having fewer babies.
The point of failure, if you reverse engineered issues too, is when a boy loses a male role model. Girls actually have similar outcomes. Boys, once they lose a male role model, become much more likely to be incarcerated, engage in criminal activity, harm themselves. It ends up that while being physically stronger, boys are emotionally and mentally much weaker. If we want better men, we need to be better men. We need to step into that void. There's incredible bias, I would argue, against males in school. A boy is twice as likely to be suspended, the exact same infraction, as a girl. 5 times as likely if it's a black boy. And once you're suspended twice, it probably means you're not going to college. In addition, look at the behaviors we promote in school. Sit still. Be a pleaser, be organized, raise your hand. You basically just described a girl. There's more women now in law school and medical school, and quite frankly, good for them. They're just better at that. They're better students. They deserve to make more money. They deserve it. But the reality is,
I do think it's very interesting how quickly the biological versus environmental arguments shifted once men started to fall behind in school. Because prior to the push to get women more involved in school, the thought was that women just kind of didn't have the brain for it. They just weren't smart like men were. They couldn't handle it. And now that argument has turned completely in the other direction to where it's like, actually, women are more designed for school than men are. And it's actually bullshit that they can do things like sit still and chill or whatever more than men can.
when we no longer have wood, auto, or metal shop, they've gone away.
Right.
So those used to be a path to decent middle-class jobs. They've been replaced by computer science. And so what are the paths for the 2/3 of males that aren't going to end up with a traditional liberal arts college degree?
Right. And just to add a few more stats to that, 70% of valedictorians in the U.S. are female, and women are much more likely to be in the top 10% of their class. But then on the SAT, young men and women earn the same scores. So there's definitely something happening in schools that is prioritizing the female experience or that women are better at that. We definitely want to celebrate the success of women. I think the changes that have happened over the last 50 years are incredible.
One of the things that really shocked me as I was preparing for this conversation was this graph.
Right.
And it shows that young women are now out-earning young men. That's not what I heard in terms of like if I log onto social media, we've been trying to fight the gender pay gap. But to see that young men are now falling behind, both in education, young men face higher unemployment, nearly twice the rate of women.
So that graph shows that boys age 16 to 24 are making 10% less in full-time employment than women. And so it is true that we're seeing a reverse income graph. But what we do need to talk about is even when women make more in their 20s, that changes around age 30.
They have kids.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like this meteorite hits
Yeah.
and there's this huge burden placed on women. And I think that's a big part of the conversation that we'll talk about when we talk about dating.
My 14-year-old boy had a Halloween party, and the boys are like, they're dopes. They're boys. There's some 14-year-old girls who look like they could be the junior senator from Pennsylvania. They're 5'10". They're articulate. Hello, Mr. Galloway. How are you? What a lovely home. And the boys are like, I don't know. And biologically, girls mature faster. Their prefrontal cortex is 18 months ahead of a boy's. An 18-year-old
And
woman
physically as well, I think. That's why there's that weird period, 4th grade, where the girls are all like taller than the boys for like a year.
is competing against a 16-and-a-half-year-old. And they're even finding that it's getting worse, that girls are starting to menstruate earlier and boys' testicles are descending later. So the biological gap, they think, might even be growing. They don't know if it's pesticides. But when I meet my 8th graders colleagues, there's a huge difference between the boys and the girls. One of Richard's suggestions is that we redshirt boys, that we hold them a year back. The boys start kindergarten at 6, whereas girls start at 5.
So the research in the UK shows that 70% of girls are ready to start school at age 5, but many fewer boys are capable of starting at that age in terms of readiness. And so if you were to hold boys back, then they might be on more equal playing field for those critical moments of 4 to 5, of 13 to 14, where the brains really develop at a different stage.
When women out-earn men, the women are also still doing like the majority of the work in the household, and the women are still doing the majority of like the emotional labor in the relationship. So you'll get this inversion of gender roles where the woman is now earning more money than the man, but the man isn't taking on more emotional responsibility of the relationship or isn't taking on more household stuff. So the woman just ends up doing everything. And then in that case, that's an easy hotbed for fostering resentment. Like nothing will make you hate your partner more than feeling like you have to do everything in a house.
Is women still feel like they have to do all the household chores and raise the kids, but suddenly they have to earn a full-time income too. 100%. And so many of the gender roles are changing. And so yes, that graph is true. We have seen since 2020 that there's a shift, but I don't want to just say, oh, women are making more in perpetuity, because as soon as there's kids involved, they pay the price. So we now have this huge mating gap where we have these high-performing, high-earning women that have done the work and gone to therapy and work out, and they're ready for their great partner, but they're not able to find enough guys who are available. And if this is a problem now with the women I work with in their 30s, we are going to be facing a much more severe crisis 10, 15 years from now. So currently 60% of college enrollment is women, but soon it's going to be for every 2 women that graduate, it'll be 1 man. So that means half of those women will not have a guy who graduated from college. And so this is a crisis because these women are saying, okay, if you cannot be the provider, then you need to be offering more. Emotional intelligence is the new currency in dating. But these guys were raised not to be emotionally intelligent, not to give emotional support, but to be a provider. And so they've been chasing this lion. I'm going to hunt for this lion of being a provider. But suddenly they're told you need to hunt for a tiger, which is emotional intelligence. They don't have the skills to do that. And so women have raised the bar in terms of what they need from men, while men are continuously falling behind.
It calls it the high heels effect. And that is 50% of women say they won't date a man shorter than them. I'm curious what you think, but I think it's more like 80%. I think it's an embarrassing thing to say because just instinctively, women feel like they'll be vulnerable during gestation and they want someone they think physically could protect them. I just think it's hardwired into them even if they don't know it.
What are women looking for? Scott talked about height.
Yeah. So I would say, I work at Hinge, but I do think that apps have perpetuated this issue around height.
I think that one problem, and maybe I'll get to it too, on dating apps, I think it's 5 men for every 1 woman. So if you're an average guy, you're already if your go-to for dating is like exclusively in the world of online dating apps, there's already been a massive error that's been committed. Shit is going to be fucked until you can figure out to not make it so that the only way for men to meet women are on dating apps. That's just always going to be a loser of a conversation. What do I do other than online apps? I have no fucking idea. Good luck.
Because if you can set your height filter to something, then you might set it higher. And then it's as if you have the dating app as a club and you're literally having bouncers that prevent a bunch of guys from even getting into the club. So many women in the US set their height filters at 6 feet, but only 14% of men in the US are 6 feet or taller. So what happens to the other 86%?
Well, but also think about that. 14% of men are 6 feet or taller. But if you're on an app where there's 1 woman for every 5 men, you can get away with that. You can get away with being that picky. Dating apps are just, it's a rough place to be at. If that's your go-to for your starting point of dating related stuff, it's just really rough.
And women are saying, where's my guy? It's like, well, he's not even showing up on your app. And so a huge thing that I push women to do is to change their height filters and just say, there is nothing that proves that you're going to have a successful long-term relationship if the guy is higher. I'm married to a short king. I love it. I feel like I really found this gem. And I think that so many women are missing out on great potential partners because of things like height.
When you ask a man if you could have a woman who had 80% of everything you wanted, 75% say, yeah, I'm on board.
Mm-hmm.
When you say to a woman, a man has 80% of what you want, 75% say that's not enough.
What was the joke?
Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and Adam said one day, wow, Eve, here we are, at one with nature, at one with God. We'll never age, we'll never die. And all our dreams come true the instant that we have them. And Eve said, yeah, it's just not enough, is it?
No, that's not funny.
I was just waiting for more.
So that was kind of his point. That's kind of what he was saying.
And women made horizontally and up, and men horizontally and down.
Right.
And when the pool of horizontal and up keeps shrinking, they just have a ton of great women. Where are the men? It's a lot of men, just not men they'd want to date.
Right.
And then you speedball it with the guys who are in the top 10% can engage in Porsche polygamy. They can get a date every goddamn night, which does not encourage long-term or very good behavior. So the guys they all want are not incented to enter into long-term relationships. And the bottom half of men are literally shut out of the mating market. A woman can go out with a high-status male. She can have sex with him, which gives her the impression that's her weight class for a relationship, but he's not interested in a relationship. And then she basically decides the bottom 90 are no longer in her weight class. And you can't tell a woman to lower her expectations, but the reality is, on dating apps, is that all of the women want the same few guys, and they shut out the rest.
You have a bunch of women competing for the same men, and then a bunch of guys get ignored. But what I also see is that those top guys are having a hard time deciding. So I feel like in my coaching practice as a dating coach, and I work with these CEO men who are having such a hard time choosing.
Scott's point as well about they will date one of the men in the top 10%.
Yeah.
Sleep with him potentially, and then that kind of adjusts their standards and they expect all other men to meet that standard, but there isn't enough men to meet that standard, is there?
I haven't specifically heard that. I mean, there is a lot of evidence around assortive mating that people sort of have an internal sense of how attractive they are and that they end up with someone similar to that women tend to date horizontally and up and men date horizontally and down. So if you have 2/3 of women who are college grads and a third of college grads who are men, and some of them are going to date women without college degrees, you truly do have this dating crisis where there's just not enough men to meet this hypergamous mating.
I will say there's only one thing that will turn you into an incel faster than listening to a red pillar, and that's talking to a woman about dating apps, okay? Don't ever make that mistake, guys, all right? What about this guy? Why didn't you go out with him? And it's like, well, I don't really know if he likes me. And it's like, you guys have been talking on DMs for 3 weeks, like every day. What do you mean you don't know if he likes you? Well, I don't know. Maybe he's talking to other people. I mean, he might be. You're talking to other people, right? Yeah, I know. But like, why don't you just ask him for coffee? You want it? Well, I don't know. Like if I ask him and he says no, it's like really humiliating. And it's like, okay, well, don't you think he might feel the same way? Like, oh, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, like if you really want, and it's like, bro, nothing will make you want to fucking kill yourself faster. Oh my God, just kidding. In a video game.
So I think we have this exacerbated problem where so many women are competing for the same men and then a bunch of guys are getting ignored. And then what ends up happening is where do those guys go? And they go online. They go to porn or they go to Reddit. They're really going to some of these red-pilled communities. And so what you're seeing now is just men really opting out of society. So when you go back to that stat, 1 in 7 young men in the UK is NEET, not in employment, education, or training. They have just opted out. And as Scott says, there's nothing scarier than a young single man. And so we are just creating a lot of these angry young single men who are saying, well, this is rigged against me. And so that's why I am worried about the rise of people like Andrew Tate. And if we wonder where are the dads, where are the men? Well, men are finding these father figures, but they're finding them online and they're not the father figures that I would choose for the majority of men. And so I'm really worried about this because I feel like women are saying, guys, you need to step up because I can provide and I don't need that from you. And guys are not prepared to rise to the occasion.
I read that on Tinder, a man of average attractiveness has to swipe right 200 times to get 1 coffee. And then 4 of those 5 coffees will ghost him. They will decide they don't want to meet him or they won't show up. That means a guy of average attractiveness has to swipe right 1,000 times to get 1 coffee. Now, what does that tell that guy? Women don't value me. Women make me feel rejected. And then they go online. They see these misogynists telling them it's not your fault. And these men become much more prone to misogynistic content, much more prone to nationalistic content, blaming other people for the lack of economic opportunity. I worry that we are literally evolving a new species of asexual, asocial male. And if a man by the age of 30 hasn't either lived with someone or married someone, there's a 1 in 3 chance he's going to have a substance abuse problem.
Damn.
In addition, it goes so much deeper than that because if they don't develop the skills, the reason romantic comedies are 2 hours, not 15 minutes is this shit is hard. 75% of people who've been married longer than 30 years say, in the beginning, one was much more interested in the other. And it was almost always the man. Women are much choosier. The basis of evolution is seed trying to get everywhere, men, and women deploying a much finer filter. Where can a man demonstrate excellence? It used to be go to temple, 7 single women, 7 single men, and they kind of paired off and worked it out. And online dating created a winner-take-most, if not all, environment. It's basically been amazing for rich, tall, wealthy guys. It's been amazing for them. All the other guys, it's been a disaster, and it's been made it mildly shittier for every woman. The digitization of mating, I believe, has been bad for women. It's been disastrous for men.
Now that women are providers and do not need a man to take care of them financially, they really want guys to step up with emotional support. But here's the paradox. They were not raised and they don't know how to give that emotional support or emotional availability. So we know women, even if they have the same number of friends as guys, the women are talking to their friends much more often. So according to the research that I did, women are saying the number one thing that they're looking for is kindness and compassion. That's also what men are saying that they're looking for.
And this is where guys screw up. This is what I tell a guy's secret weapon is. It's kindness.
Well, that was worth it. Just kidding.
Women want to see that you are a good person, treat service staff well, you're good to your parents, you have manners, you treat people well even with no reciprocal expectation, because they know that a kind person, if and when she's vulnerable and needs help and maybe isn't just bringing as much to the table for certain periods of time, that this is a kind man. Sure, you want to do your best to signal resources and have a plan. Sure, maybe you're smart, maybe you aren't. There's not a lot you can do there. But the secret weapon, I think, for men that they don't leverage and I do think it's a practice, is to demonstrate kindness. It's little things. Have good manners. Be thoughtful. Follow up with people. And we don't talk about that enough as men. Number 2 is intellect. And it's very instinctual because if you make good decisions for the tribe, your kids are more likely to survive. Someone who's smart is more likely to take care of your offspring than someone who's stupid. But it's interesting. The fastest way to communicate intellect is humor. This is my impression of a woman. I'm laughing, I'm naked. And that is, I've always thought if a guy can make a woman laugh, she will date him.
I feel like I won the lottery with my husband, but he is somebody that takes longer to open up, and he's this slow burn. I feel like he's this incredible partner, husband, father, but I don't know that if we'd met just randomly on the first date that I would have gone on a second date. And so I think people really do need to train themselves to look for these slow burns.
The problem that you run into with this, I think, is just the lack of, and this is the thing where I'm truly grateful I'm an online superstar. Not even just that, but like my early job, like at a restaurant, everything else. You have an opportunity to be friends with people and to learn how they are, and over time, eventually start dating someone. You have that opportunity if you're in gender combined environments. But I feel like the world has become so much more gender segregated, in that like, where the fuck are you ever going to spend a lot of time around a person so they can either come to like you, or you can even learn how to interact with women? It feels like these spaces are very, very, very hard to find today. That's what it feels like. Yeah, if I was like single today and I had like no online presence and I had no job with like women, I don't think I would ever go to a bar to meet somebody. God, it just seems like such a miserable fuck environment because you're literally doing a crapshoot. I don't know what you do for like joint activities where like men and women are doing a thing together. That's not fucking miserable. This is why school is so nice. Listen, just try to meet somebody in school. If you don't meet anybody in school, then it's fucking over for you, okay? Good luck. I'm just kidding, but not really.